Not a very good actor in real life. Real life मेरे चेहरे पे दिख जाता है झूठ बोल रही है.
In Germany, the biggest newspaper was written on the first page. This is a finishing from Lothar Matthäus' career, and this was motivating me.
I was literally on my phone at home, and they're like, "Oh, we have the results. We suggest that you remove your breast." And I'm like, "Wait, what?"
When I started stumbling and I started making the mistakes, that I realized that now that person who I have not forgiven 2 years back, now I know what he feels like.
Very important understanding of life, that you will only get opportunities if you're good. And if you're not good, don't expect opportunities.
The best example I could ever give is Abraham Lincoln, losing every election he ever had till he won the presidency.
You know, I actually have the feeling that my life hasn't started yet.
We all have 2 lives. The second one begins the day we realize that we only have 1 life.
Wow.
In Assam, the debate over infiltration is back.
এইটোৱে হৈছে বিজেপিৰ সংকল্প, এয়াই হৈছে বিজেপিৰ প্ৰতিজ্ঞা।
Will NRC settle the question of identity?
असम से हिमंत बिश्व शर्मा को यहाँ से भेज पाएंगे।
Or will the fight over borders will shape this election?
From the ground, the questions that matter, the voices that shape the vote. India votes only on News 9. This is India's #1 news network, and you're watching News 9. English news as it should be.
Very good morning. You're watching News 9. I'm Karthik Malhotra. This is Morning Brief at 9. The big story we're tracking for you this morning as the war in Iran grinds on. Commercial LPG prices in India have increased by around 200 rupees more per cylinder starting today. No changes in prices for household cooking gas just as yet. Also on the show, air turbine fuel or ATF prices have doubled in the wake of fuel supply shock. Will airlines hike ticket prices next? And Iran threatens attack on US big tech operating in West Asia, asks residents to move beyond a 1-kilometer radius of US big tech offices. Trump says he knows nothing about the threat. And as Trump hints at the war ending soon, de-escalation hope triggers recovery in US and Asian stocks. Indian markets expected to open stronger. This and more on this edition of Morning Brief at 9. You're watching Morning Brief at 9. First up, a quick look at all the headlines we're tracking for you this Wednesday morning. Commercial LPG prices surge sharply across major cities. Second hike in a month raises costs for businesses, while domestic rates remain unchanged, for now at least. Jet fuel prices hit a historic high as aviation turbine fuel crosses 2 lakh rupees per kilolitre in Delhi, more than doubling amid surging global crude prices due to West Asia tensions, raising concerns over higher airfares. Meanwhile, IndiGo names industry veteran Willie Walsh as chief executive officer as the airline navigates regulatory scrutiny and disruptions linked to the Iran war. Iran's Revolutionary Guards threaten action against major US big tech firms operating in the West Asian region, including Apple and Google, warns employees to evacuate as tensions escalate amid West Asia conflict. Iran President Masoud Pezeshkian signals willingness to end conflict with US, seeks firm security guarantees to prevent future attacks. Average gasoline prices in the United States rise above $4 a gallon, a 30% hike as the Iran war continues to disrupt global energy markets and fuel inflation concerns. Consumer products giant Unilever reportedly halts hiring worldwide for at least 3 months, citing uncertainty and cost pressures from the escalating West Asia conflict. In a rare and unprecedented move, US President Donald Trump set to personally attend Supreme Court arguments in a landmark case to end birthright citizenship. And ChatGPT maker OpenAI hits a valuation of $852 billion after raising $122 billion, underscoring massive AI investments even as questions linger over long-term profitability. India's commercial fuel costs have surged once again, with state-run oil firms announcing a sharp hike in the 19 kg commercial LPG cylinder prices amid the ongoing tensions in West Asia. In Delhi and Mumbai, prices have risen by 195 rupees and 50 paisa, pushing retail rates to 2,078 rupees 50 paisa and 2,031 rupees respectively. In Kolkata saw an even steeper increase of as much as 218 rupees per cylinder, taking prices to 2,208 rupees and 50 paisa, while in Chennai, cylinders now cost 2,246 rupees after a hike of 203 rupees per commercial cylinder. Additionally, prices of the 5 kg FTL cylinder have also increased by around 51 rupees effective today. Now, this marks the second consecutive increase following a 114 rupee jump on March 1st, adding pressure on businesses like hotels, restaurants and small industries that rely heavily on commercial LPG. However, there is some relief for households. Domestic LPG prices remain unchanged for now, at least, with the 14.2 kg cylinder still priced at 913 rupees in Delhi after a 60 rupee hike earlier in the month of March. Fuel retailers, including Indian Oil Corporation, Bharat Petroleum and Hindustan Petroleum, have revised LPG prices monthly based on global energy benchmarks and currency fluctuations. Meanwhile, petrol and diesel prices continue to remain stable, at least for now. In Delhi, petrol is holding at 94 rupees 72 paisa per litre and diesel at 87 rupees 62 paisa, unchanged since last year's 2 rupee per litre hike. And it's not just LPG. A massive spike in jet fuel prices is set to hit Indian air travel, with aviation turbine fuel breaching a historic mark. Jet fuel prices in the national capital have more than doubled, in fact increased by as much as 115%, crossing the 2 lakh rupee per kilolitre mark for the first time ever. In Delhi, aviation turbine fuel, or ATF, has been hiked to 2,07,341 rupees per kilolitre, up sharply from under 1 lakh, in fact, at just 96,638 rupees per kilolitre earlier. Now, this unprecedented surge comes amid the rising global crude oil prices triggered by the escalating conflict in West Asia. With fuel accounting for a major portion of airline operating costs, this sharp increase is expected to put pressure on airfares. In a bid to cushion the impact, Civil Aviation Minister Ram Mohan Naidu has urged states to reduce VAT on jet fuel. Sources say the minister has written to chief ministers ahead of the April 1st price revision, seeking relief for both airlines and passengers. Currently, VAT on ATF goes up to 25% in states like Delhi, significantly adding to airline expenses. The centre is now in discussions with states to rationalize these taxes and prevent a steep rise in ticket prices. And Sabita Chaudhary is following this story, in fact tracking it very closely, and he joins me now from the newsroom. Sabia, what do we know? Because more than doubling of ATF is likely to increase ticket prices for consumers, but the Civil Aviation Minister asking states to cut VAT. How practical does that seem?
See, that's right. The airlines or the carriers will not able to tackle the situation, so they are going to pass it on to the passengers, and after that we are going to see an increase as far as the airfares are concerned. Now, Civil Aviation Minister Ram Mohan Naidu had held a meeting with all the stakeholders. In fact, he has written a letter to all the chief ministers of the country and have humbly requested them to cut down the VAT, because states like Tamil Nadu charges around 29% VAT, Delhi charges 25% VAT, and Mumbai charges 18% VAT. So the minister is hoping that the states will reduce their VATs so that the passengers as well as the airlines do not face inconvenience. But it's going to be difficult for the carriers, because once the airfares also increases, we are going to see less footfall in airports, as also the airlines are going to deal with, on one hand, the charges of the turbine fuel is increasing, and on one hand, if they increase the airfares, the footfall of the passengers are also expected to decrease. So that is the reason why the carriers are at a very bad situation right now, and that is the reason why time and again they have requested the ministry to request the state governments to cut down on the VAT. But so far the ministry sources say that they are in constant touch with the state officials, and the discussions are going on to cut down the VAT as soon as possible, because because of the ongoing conflict in West Asia, because of the flights taking longer routes, and also the rupee falling all-time low, and the aircraft has to purchase the oil in dollars. So all these reasons combined, it's going to be a difficult situation as far as the airlines are concerned.
Absolutely, a very precarious time, Sabya, but just help our viewers understand that ATF, or the fuel cost, the operating cost as far as just fuel is concerned, is almost anything between 20 to 40% of the total operating cost for airlines. Now, with this 20 to 40% cost doubling, even a slight reduction in VAT, which is at most just 25% in Delhi, is going to make a very minor dent in the overall operating cost. So is it fair to assume at this point that air ticket prices are definitely going to rise by anything between 20 to 30%?
See, the airlines sources say that it's definitely going to have impact as far as the airfares are concerned, because what the industry sources tell us that the airlines are already going in losses because of the airspace closure, the airlines taking longer routes, which means they are going to burn more fuel. So the airlines are going through a loss, and at this particular time when the crude prices are increasing globally, so as per that the turbine fuel charges has also increased in India. In the national capital, the charges has gone up to 2 lakh, and it's a direct increase of 115%. If you talk about the international prices, the increase is roughly around 105 to 7%. So the airlines say it's going to be a difficult time, and the sources tell us that most of the airlines will face difficult to cope up with that, and that is the reason why they are going to directly transfer it to the passengers and increase the airfares, because the government is trying its best, because on one hand they have put a capping on the export of the turbine fuel, as well as they have cut down on the excise duty of petrol and diesel. So the government is taking its step, but the airlines say that the prices or the airfares are going to increase. But on one hand, the ministry is trying its level best to cut down on the VAT and requested the states. But we have to wait and see how much the prices or the airfares increases.
How long, in your opinion, Sabya, do we have to wait? Because the fuel price increase comes into effect from today. How long before that gets passed on?
Well, very shortly, because what I have learned from the sources within the ministry, that Ramo Naidu have been holding several meetings with all the stakeholders regarding the current situation, though the government has assured the airlines that all possible help will be provided to them so that the passengers does not face inconvenience. But the point has been made very clear to the ministry by the airlines that they won't be able to face all the brunt, and they have to transfer it to the passengers. So very soon we are expecting that the airfares are going to increase.
Sabyasachi Roy Chaudhary, thank you so much for your input to this story. Moving on, but staying with the world of aviation, Korean Air is set to enter emergency management mode from April as surging fuel costs linked to Iran conflict begin to weigh heavily on its operations. Now, fuel is, remember, one of the biggest cost components for airlines, and the recent spike has added significant pressure across the aviation sector. Take a look.
Korean Air will enter emergency management mode in April. A source with knowledge of the matter told Reuters on Tuesday that the decision was driven by rising oil prices amid the war in the Middle East. The airline said in an internal memo that if high oil prices persist, it expects significant disruption to its annual business targets. It said it will shift to an emergency operating system from April. The memo, reviewed by Reuters, added that the airline plans to implement phased response measures based on oil price levels and step up company-wide cost efficiency to offset surging fuel costs. Shares in Korean Air were trading down 3% on Tuesday afternoon in Asia. South Korean Airlines, Tiway Air, and Asiana Airlines have also entered emergency management mode this month, according to local media reports, underscoring the broader strain on the country's aviation industry. Meanwhile, Hong Kong's Cathay Pacific Airways is, for now, sticking with its plan to expand passenger capacity by 10% this year, despite rising jet fuel costs. But CEO Ronald Lam said passenger and cargo demand was not going to be in a, quote, sustainable situation if the jet fuel price remained double its pre-conflict levels for too long. Since the war in the Middle East began, the airline has seen higher demand for its long-haul flights to North America, Europe, and Australia.
And back to Indian aviation now. India's largest airline, IndiGo, has made a high-profile leadership move, appointing aviation heavyweight Willie Walsh as its new chief executive officer just months after Peter Elber's exit. Now, the move comes at a challenging time for IndiGo, which has been grappling with regulatory scrutiny and operational disruptions following a major flight cancellation crisis in the month of December last year. At the same time, rising fuel costs linked to the ongoing Iran conflict are adding pressure on the aviation sector, impacting margins and operational planning.
IndiGo named an aviation industry heavyweight as its new CEO on Tuesday. The Indian airline said the former boss of British Airways, Willie Walsh, will take charge later this year. He's currently leading the International Air Transport Association industry body. His term there ends in July, and IndiGo said he's expected to join their company by August 3rd at the latest. Walsh has built a long career in commercial aviation. He was CEO at Irish airline Aer Lingus before taking over at British Airways in 2005. It was there where he had to lead the airline through the global financial crisis and oversee a merger with Iberia to create IAG. His appointment comes weeks after Peter Elbers suddenly stepped down as IndiGo's CEO. It followed regulators criticising the airline's failure to plan enough for pilot rest and duty rules. That led to mass flight cancellations in December in what was the carrier's biggest crisis in its 20-year history. IndiGo has about a 65% share of India's aviation market, which is the world's fastest growing.
Well, inflation in the Eurozone has surged past the European Central Bank's 2% target this month, driven largely by rising oil and gas prices. The spike reflects the impact of higher energy costs as the ongoing conflict in West Asia continues to disrupt global supply and push prices upward.
Eurozone inflation soared past the European Central Bank's 2% target this month as surging oil and gas costs drove up headline prices. But the jump was smaller than expected and core inflation declined, muddying the picture for policymakers. Overall, inflation in the 21 countries sharing the euro currency jumped to 2.5% in March from 1.9% a month earlier. That was below expectations in a Reuters poll of economists. Energy costs rose 4.9%. Oil prices have nearly doubled as a result of the Iran war, and the ECB is now debating whether to raise interest rates to prevent this surge from becoming entrenched in the price of other goods and services. Data showed that a closely watched figure on underlying inflation, which excludes volatile food and energy, fell to 2.3% from 2.4%. Basic economic theory argues central banks should look past one-off price shocks generated by supply disruptions, especially because monetary policy works with long lags. But a quick rise in energy inflation can easily broaden out if companies start building this into selling prices, and if workers begin demanding higher wages for the loss of disposable income. The public may also start doubting the ECB's resolve if it remains idle. Financial markets now see 3 interest rate hikes from the ECB this year, with the first in either April or June.
Staying with those oil prices, they remain volatile even on Tuesday's markets, with the possibility of a US push to end the Iran war against the risk of prolonged supply disruptions. Reports suggest US President Donald Trump may be open to winding down the conflict, raising hopes of de-escalation among investors.
Oil prices were volatile on Tuesday. Investors weighed the possibility of President Donald Trump ending the war against supply shocks from a prolonged closure of the Strait of Hormuz, a major artery for global oil flows. Brent crude futures for May were up over 0.5% in early European trade, in a session that has seen prices swing between a 2% rise and a 1% fall. Analysts said prices had briefly reacted to the idea of the war ending, but any meaningful change would not materialize until shipping through the Strait of Hormuz was completely reinstated. The Wall Street Journal, citing administration officials on Monday, reported Trump told aides he's willing to end the military campaign against Iran, even if the Strait of Hormuz remains largely closed. The US president had warned that the US would obliterate Iran's energy plants and oil wells if Tehran didn't reopen the waterway. Iran's effective closure of the Strait of Hormuz has pushed Brent futures up 59% so far in March. Highlighting the threat to seaborne energy supplies, Kuwait Petroleum Corp on Tuesday said its fully loaded crude oil tanker, capable of carrying up to 2 million barrels, was struck by an alleged Iranian attack at a Dubai port. Officials also warned of potential oil spills in the area.
And fuel prices in the United States have surged past a key psychological threshold, with the national average retail price of gasoline or petrol crossing $4 per gallon for the first time in over 3 years. In fact, the national average has jumped by more than $1 in just a month, reflecting one of the fastest increases in recent years. The spike is now adding to inflation concerns, with higher fuel costs feeding into transportation, logistics and everyday expenses. Here's more.
It's just this whole war situation, it's just causing everything to go up. It's absolutely dumb. I don't know why we're even over there in the first place. It's just causing a havoc on everybody. It's just brutal what they're doing. And we're suffering because what? Yeah, $50 for 10 gallons? I mean, it's horrible. It's just disgusting.
This is the highest, that I've seen in a very, very long time, if not ever. And it's not affordable anymore. It's just, it's not right. It's not right. Something needs to be done. Something needs to be done.
Hey man, just start checking my pockets. Come up with that. Can't afford it. I just put 8 in there for right now, man. But I'm going across the other side where it's cheap at.
If I was to fill this up right now, it would probably cost me almost $80. And I don't have $80 to put in this car.
Well, the European Union is considering reviving energy crisis measures it used in 2022 when Russia slashed gas deliveries to address the unfolding disruption to energy markets now caused by the Iran war. Now, speaking after a virtual meeting of EU countries' energy ministers to discuss their response, EU Energy Commissioner said the plans included proposals to curb grid tariffs and taxes on electricity.
That since we don't know how long this crisis will last and since we don't know how deep it will be, we are also preparing different opportunities and possibilities that look more like the ones we used under the crisis in 22. It's very important to underline that it will not be short, because even if there was a peace tomorrow, there would still be consequences. Because energy infrastructure in the region has been ruined by the war and continuously is being ruined by the war.
All right, let's slip into a very short commercial break. When we come back, a look at the stock markets, which are positively green this morning. We'll get you a view from Gaurang Shah after this short break.
Kushak. Easy to love. Skoda.
The LPG shortage is now being felt across several cities in India. Our reporters traveled across the country to bring you the ground reality.
It's impacting your and my kitchen.
Gas crisis hits kitchen fires. Restaurants and small businesses shutting down.
Very difficult because everything runs on LPG.
LPG cylinders are running short.
Supply shortage, hoarding or panic buying.
कहाँ भी कोई भी 3000 दे तुरंत सिलेंडर मिलेगा.
What's the government doing to control the crisis?
So the question is whether India is prepared.
News 9 ground reports.
Growing uncertainty over the availability of LPG in the national capital.
We are here at the ground. News 9 will be tracking the problems of the people.
But the people that we spoke to on ground have a different story to tell.
Will be continuous coverage.
Continuous coverage on News 9. In your interest.
Back. Let's dive straight into a mood check on stock markets. Let's begin first with Asia. Remember, the US markets had closed on a positive note, and that sort of knock-on effect is visible even on Asian stocks this morning. Look at South Korea's Kospi, which is up almost 7%, 6.7% in trade this morning. Japan's Nikkei 225 also up more than 4%. Look at Taiwan's TAIEX, that's up about 4.5% too, and Hang Seng as well as the Shanghai Composite Index, pretty much all of Asia in a nice shade of green this morning. Remember, all this coming in the wake of the US President Donald Trump saying that he could wind down operations in Iran soon. Similar impact seen even in the Indian stock markets, at least in the first few minutes of trade. The Sensex and the Nifty are both up in healthy margins today, both up more than 2.5%. In fact, the Sensex is up almost 1,900 points from the close we saw 2 days back. Remember, yesterday was a market holiday. The Nifty mid-cap and small-cap outperforming the benchmark, with the small-cap index up more than 3% in trade this morning. Meanwhile, volatility in the Indian markets has been tamed a little bit, still at elevated levels of about 25, but at least not the 28, 29 levels that we had seen earlier this week. Let's look at the Nifty 50 heat map, and pretty much every stock on the Nifty 50 is in the green this morning. A relief, one would say, after days and days of deep cuts and the pain associated with those cuts for investors. Let's put this into perspective with Gaurang Shah, Senior Vice President, Geojit Financial Services, who joins us this morning. Good morning, Gaurang, and indeed a good morning today after a while, isn't it?
Yes, Karthik. Indeed, sea of green after a long, prolonged sea of red is what we are witnessing. Thank you so much, Karthik, for having me on the show. Good morning to you and to all your viewers. A small disclosure. All recommendations that I'll be sharing with you on your show, they are part of our fundamental research team recommendation from a long-term point of view. Our company, Geojit, or myself, we do not have any kind of personal investments, no financial interest, no conflict of interest, but we share similar investment ideas with our clients. They might have their investment interests. So after the flip-flop and shifting of goalpost for the last maybe more than a month, it's good to see, Karthik, that common sense, wisdom, and fine sense of judgment has prevailed upon the President of United States of America, Donald Trump. The big question is that, first of all this should not have started at all. And then came the consistent shifting of goals, from change of regime to getting democracy, to getting hands on crude oil, to getting control of Strait of Hormuz, to getting hands on enriched uranium, etc., etc. And to putting boots on grounds, not to forget that, to giving ultimatum of 48 hours and then giving a ceasefire of 5 days. I mean, too much of flip-flop. But yeah, it's good to see now. What we need to see, Karthik, is that whether all this thing does translate into ground reality. You cannot take anything for granted, Karthik, especially when it's coming out from White House President Donald Trump. Let's hope and pray. And this week is again a curtailed week, short week. Yesterday we had a holiday. On Friday again, 3rd of April. I beg your pardon, Karthik, is holiday because of Good Friday. Exchanges are closed. And if we have some positive development, I think by the time we get back to trade on next week, Monday, and if there is ground reality visible enough to prove that yes, withdrawal and de-escalation has started, then I wouldn't be surprised to see again a very strong opening on Monday, but that's a long time ahead. Let us rejoice today. Markets are holding out to the opening levels of almost about 2.5% plus.
Right.
And I think if there is going to be a sizable downscaling in crude oil prices, if rupee strengthened against the dollar, and if India VIX has to come down to a much more comfortable zone, then I think we should have positivities.
All right. But in the slew of positivity that we are seeing in the markets, there are two pieces of negative news which have come this morning, not impacting the markets just as yet. But the first one, of course, is the commercial LPG prices which have been hacked, Gaurang.
Yeah.
This is obviously something which is likely to, over time, drive up inflation. And the second is aviation turbine fuel, and those prices have also more than doubled. Is this something which is going to, at some point, add to the inflation woes and eventually the growth projections?
So, Karthik, what we need to witness is that, and it was quite a decent upward revision on commercial cylinders, Karthik.
Yeah.
ATF prices, you and me have to pay for it, Karthik. And we have to decide whether we want to take a flight or whether we want to take a train or a bus, or we want to travel by our own personal vehicle. Even 10 days, 15 days back, if I'm not mistaken, some of the airlines did hike their airfares with additional hike in fuel surcharge. So this is going to not impact the airlines. I think margins will improve. And that's what I mentioned, Karthik. If crude oil prices have to scale downwards, then I think there should be a lot of more positivity in terms of the scare that we all got in terms of inflation going up, interest rates going out of the window. Forget about rate cuts. We were thinking about rate hikes.
That's right.
And the GDP also getting revised downwards. So if things do materialize, I'm also of the opinion, Karthik, that whatever damages has been done to any facility, whether it is crude oil, whether it is natural gas, whether there is damage to the infrastructure, all these will take time to come back to normalcy, right? So till that time, I think we should be a little bit elevated. But yes, to answer your question immediately in the short to medium term, whether this could disturb inflation, as of now, it looks like. Now we need to wait and see how prolonged these elevated levels of commercial cylinders and, of course, any kind of huge negative impact on the inflation front.
All right. Let's also talk about some stocks in news, particularly impacted by these developments. Let's first begin with IOCL, because LPG prices, like we've been discussing, have been hiked, and also IndiGo. In addition to the ATF price hike, which may be a negative, it also has a new CEO, Willie Walsh. So what do you make of these two developments and the impact of these developments on IOCL and on IndiGo, respectively?
So on both, as a disclosure, we have coverage, not only IOCL, but we have coverage on BPCL and HPCL as well. That's a disclosure from our side. On Interglobe Aviation also, we have a coverage. And I think whatever damages were done by the earlier CEO in first week of December of 2025, I think compensation and the resignation of the earlier CEO, and now this gentleman, Mr. William Walsh, coming in, I hope he's able to get things back to normal and bring back the glory that IndiGo used to have. It's still one of the largest fleet operators, has got a decent market share, not only in domestic market, but also in international market. There are going to be additional aircrafts that's going to be added, Karthik, to the fleet. So that's going to open up positivity. Soon we'll have Jewar Airport also operational. Udan 2, I believe a week back, there was additional allocation given by the government to improve air connectivity. So there is a lot of positivity. 4,400 approximately, Karthik, or thereabouts, is the target for Interglobe Aviation from a long-term point of view.
All right. And all transportation stocks seem to be in the green this morning. You're talking about airports. Even GMR Airport is up about 4.5%, 4.3%. The logistics firms, Concur, Delivery, all these are up this morning in trade. Pretty much one would have estimated that perhaps this hike in fuel prices is something which is going to impact their margins. But it seems all the players are pretty clear that they will pass them on to consumers, isn't it?
We have to pay for it, right, Karthik? Companies don't take it, right? So you and me have to, and people call consumers. They are the last in the line to take this hit,
right?
And they cannot pass it on to anybody else. So amongst the logistic companies, Blue Dart, Transport Corporation of India, and Delivery. These are some of the names, and this is also a, the margins would also get impacted, because if the import-export gets hit of any country, then the first or the second in line to take hit is the logistic companies, because they don't get their trucks running on the dedicated freight corridors or the expresses of the highways. Transportation of goods becomes a little bit more difficult. You don't have incoming and outgoing merchandise, which used to be as earlier. But let's hope that, and as we all know, sea route are one of the topmost routes for any kind of commercial activity with respect to import and export. So I think that's one of the reasons, of course. And of course, like you were mentioning, fuel prices have a direct impact on logistic companies as well. But I think things should settle down now.
All right. And you did say you have a coverage on IOCL, BPCL, HPCL. Overall, how do you see, the overall elevated oil prices globally impacting margins for these, retailers of fuel over time, given the fact that the government does not seem to be very keen, at least in election season, to increase retail prices?
Yeah, so I don't think till May we'll see any kind of upward movement. And I hope by that time we get back to some decent level in the international commodity market with respect to crude oil and NYMEX, and of course natural gas. So, the fact of the matter, Karthik, is from $60-65, we went up to $110-115 on Brent, and maybe $100 plus on the NYMEX. So this twice, it's 2x price hike. Along with that, Karthik, insurance premium went up and logistic freight cost went up. So somebody has to bear the brunt of all these things. So as of now, I think the government is taking whatever it could, and they are trying to restructure in terms of indirect taxes that are there. If we are still at elevated level, then my sense is that second week of May, we should prepare ourselves for paying a little bit more from our pockets for a liter of diesel and petrol. But if things get stabilized and if there is less impact on the oil pool account, then I don't think we should worry much about it. But it's all futuristic, Karthik. We'll have to wait and watch.
Okay. We're also seeing a massive bounce back in IT stocks this morning, Gaurang, outperforming the benchmark with pretty much every stock in the region of about 2.5% or more up. Also, another news item that came was from Coforge, which has received an RBI nod for $1 billion investment in Encora, which is an overseas investment. Overall, the IT story, obviously, there's a knock-on effect because the US markets closed with healthy gains overnight. But also, overall, do you feel with all this sort of negativity around Oracle also getting rid of some 30,000 roles, is the IT sector likely to stay a good investment for, for retail investors? Or do you think this would be a good opportunity to sit on some cash?
Sitting on cash is never advisable. I have not done that, Karthik.
Okay.
And I have also given a disclosure. I did not stop my SIPs, nor during this war, nor during earlier wars or COVID times. So I don't think sitting on cash is a wise idea. You have to put your money to work, right?
Book some profits at these elevated levels in IT stocks and reinvest them somewhere else. Would that be a prudent decision
to
make?
So. Karthik, that's one thing that I don't like. Flip-flop.
Okay.
I think IT, and as a matter of fact, let me give a disclosure, Karthik. Coforge, we have a positive coverage. There was a problem with IT companies, and this will remain for some time with the kind of innovations that we are coming out as far as AI is concerned. And depending upon those innovations, modernizations, technology upgrade, IT companies will react to that, not only in India, but across the globe. But we also have a view that IT sector and contribution from IT and IT services, platforms, whatever be it, are very crucial for your existence. And if you become irrelevant with IT, then you start to kind of, your existence becomes disappearing. It fades off. So we are positive on Coforge. We are positive on almost all the large cap names: TCS, Infosys, HCL Tech Mahindra. Some of the mid cap names that we are positive on are KPIT Tech Science Limited, LTMindtree amongst the mid to large, L&T Technologies. So we remain, and only thing is have 1.5-2 year plus kind of time horizon.
All right, keep a longer time horizon is the word coming in from Gaurang Shah as far as IT stocks are concerned, and of course a bullish take on Coforge. Gaurang Shah, thank you so much, as always. Pleasure having you here with us on News 9. And before we slip into another break, some recovery can be seen, in fact, from the elevated levels that we saw in the market this morning. There's been some correction, but markets continue to be in the green. Sensex and Nifty are up more than 2.25% each. Now, the gains have been paired a little bit with the Sensex up about 1,650 odd points, still comfortably above the 73,500 odd levels. India VIX, meanwhile, the volatility has slipped further to levels below 25. With that, we will slip into a very short break. A lot more coming up on the other side. Keep watching News 9.
In Tamil Nadu, the battle over language returns.
ஒரே மொழி பேசுகிறோம், ஒரே எதிர்காலத்தை நோக்கி நடக்கிறோம்.
Election about identity, loyalty.
Bye bye, Stalin!
Dravida model versus double engine की सरकार.
बीजेपी एनडीए की डबल इंजन सरकार बनना तय है.
The stakes are high.
From the ground, the questions that matter. The voices that shape the vote. India votes. Only on News 9.
खेला होगा हर नहले पे दहला होगा टीम बड़ा है स्टेज बड़ा है पूरा भारत साथ खड़ा है साथ खड़ा है गेम बड़ा है dribble like a rap pass setting up the trap kick it hard in the boot chuck there for the ball Chuck a day for the ball. Chuck a day for the ball. Chuck a day for the ball.
Welcome back. Now, Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps has issued a dramatic threat targeting major U.S. technology and industrial firms, escalating tensions amid the ongoing West Asia conflict. In a statement, the Guards warned that 18 leading companies, including Apple, Google, Meta, IBM, Tesla, and Boeing, could face attacks starting April 1st. The Guards alleged that these companies were complicit in targeted assassination of Iranian officials and warned that their relevant units would be destroyed in retaliation. The statement also advised employees to immediately evacuate their workspaces, signaling the seriousness of the threat. Now, other firms named include Microsoft, Intel, Dell, Nvidia, Cisco, Oracle, HP, JP Morgan, and General Electric, among others. Now, labeling them as terrorist companies, the Guards also urged civilians living within a 1-kilometer radius of these facilities to relocate to safer areas. Now, the threat comes even as US President Donald Trump pushes for diplomacy while warning of a possible escalation in the US-Israeli campaign against Iran. Tehran has accused both the US government and major tech firms of playing a central role in tracking and enabling strikes against its officials. Meanwhile, US President Donald Trump dismissed Iran's warning, ridiculing the threat and saying Tehran doesn't even know what they are threatening about, signaling Washington's confidence even as tensions continue to escalate.
I don't know. I mean, what are they? You made a statement. What did they threaten them with? I don't know. Tell me, how did they threaten them?
Well, all I know is that they threatened them, sir.
What does that mean?
Fair enough.
You said something nasty.
Is the government in touch with these companies? Are you helping to backstop them?
You don't even know what the threat was. What was the threat? I haven't heard it. What was the threat? Did they say they're going to blow them up? They're going to hit them? They're not. You know what they're not going to do? They're not going to hit them with a nuclear weapon. Yeah.
Is this something you're concerned about, sir?
No.
The conflict in West Asia is now impacting jobs as well. Consumer goods giant Unilever has announced a global hiring freeze as the widening conflict in West Asia begins to weigh on corporate decision-making. According to an internal memo, the freeze will apply across all levels of hiring and is expected to remain in place for at least 3 months. Unilever, the maker of brands like Dove, is among the latest firms to respond to the economic ripple effect of the conflict.
Dove soap maker Unilever has implemented a global hiring freeze at all levels that will last at least 3 months. A memo seen by Reuters showed the company cited the effects of the widening conflict in the Middle East. Sent to staff last week and previously unreported, Unilever said the freeze would take effect immediately and was made with an eye on the significant challenges from the month-old Iran war. Firms globally, from airlines to retail, are scrambling to protect themselves from the effects of the conflict, which has hit global trade flows and resulted in the worst-ever disruption of oil and gas supplies. The rapid surge in energy costs is already surfacing in other markets, slowing production in industries like chemicals and plastics. The London-based consumer products giant owns some of the world's most prominent brands. While it produces most of its goods where it sells them, it buys chemicals, food, packaging and other raw materials that are energy-intensive to create. The freeze comes on top of an existing cost-cutting program Unilever has had in place since 2024. Separately, the firm said Tuesday it was in advanced talks with spice maker McCormick about a potential combination of their food businesses. The potential deal would deliver roughly $15.7 billion in cash to Unilever, while giving its shareholders majority control of the merged entity.
U.S. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth warned that the next few days in the conflict with Iran will be decisive, cautioning that fighting could intensify if Tehran fails to reach a deal. He said American firepower is increasing while Iran's options are shrinking, highlighting Washington's readiness to escalate pressure.
The upcoming days will be decisive. Iran knows that.
U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth issued a warning to Tehran on Tuesday, saying the conflict would intensify in the next few days if it did not make a deal.
American firepower is only increasing. Iran's decreasing. We have more and more options, and they have less.
But Iran's Revolutionary Guards hit back with a new threat, saying it will target U.S. companies in the region in retaliation for attacks on Iran. Among the targets it listed were some of America's biggest companies, including Microsoft, Google, Apple, and Tesla. The warnings from each side came after an Iranian drone attacked a fully loaded oil tanker off Dubai, setting the vessel on fire. Authorities said the fire had been brought under control, with no oil leak and no injuries to the crew. It was the latest attack on merchant vessels in the Gulf or in the Strait of Hormuz since the U.S.-Israel conflict began. It also came a day after President Donald Trump threatened to obliterate Iran's energy plants if it did not agree to a peace deal to open the strait. Crude oil prices briefly spiked again after the attack on the tanker.
When NATO just wasn't there.
And Trump lashed out at NATO allies that haven't helped in the war, including France and Britain, saying in a Truth Social post, quote, "Go get your own oil." When Hegseth was asked by Reuters if the U.S. was still committed to NATO's collective defense, he declined to reaffirm that commitment.
And as far as NATO is concerned, that's a decision that will be left to the president. But I'll just say a lot has been laid bare. A lot has been shown to the world about what our allies would be willing to do for the United States of America when we undertake an effort of this scope on behalf of the free world. These are missiles that don't even range the United States of America. They range allies and others. And yet when we ask for additional assistance or simple access basing overflight, we get questions or roadblocks or hesitations.
His remarks were an apparent reference to tensions with France, Italy, Spain, and Britain. On Tuesday, sources said France and Italy have pushed back against some U.S.-Israeli military operations. Meanwhile, Spain defended its decision to fully close its airspace to U.S. planes involved in attacks on Iran. Experts have long warned that remarks suggesting that the United States might not honor its NATO commitments could encourage Russia to test NATO members' readiness to enforce the alliance's Article 5, which states that an armed attack against one NATO member is an attack on all.
Iran, meanwhile, has signaled a potential opening to end its ongoing conflict with the United States, with President Masoud Pezeshkian stating that Tehran has the necessary will to stop the war, provided its security is guaranteed and future attacks are prevented. Now, speaking amid heightened tensions, Pezeshkian emphasized that Iran does not seek prolonged conflict but will not agree to any settlement without firm and binding assurances. He stressed that any resolution must safeguard the security and interests of the Iranian people, underscoring Tehran's cautious approach to de-escalation. The Iranian president added that the country is open to reducing tensions if credible guarantees are put in place to prevent further aggression. Meanwhile, US President Donald Trump said Washington could end its military campaign against Iran within 2 to 3 weeks, calling it a likely exit from the month-long conflict that has shaken the West Asia and global energy markets. Speaking from the Oval Office, Trump added that Tehran does not necessarily need to strike a deal with the US for the conflict to wind down, signaling a potential unilateral withdrawal.
What is the plan to bring them back down?
All I have to do is leave Iran, and we'll be doing that very soon. And they'll become tumbling down. And stock prices were up today almost to a record because they know two things. Number one, we have a safe country. We had to take a little detour because we had a madman named Khomeini who sadly is no longer with us. And we had regime change already. We've knocked out one regime, then we knocked out the second regime. Now we have a group of people that are very different. They're much more reasonable, I think much less radicalized. We have had regime change. We're dealing with people that are much more rational. I would say that within 2 weeks, maybe 3. We're hitting them very hard. Last night we knocked out tremendous amounts of missile-making facilities. As you probably read or wrote, we knocked out. Excuse me.
Pardon me for interrupting. The U.S. will be gone or done with the war in 2
I
or 3
think we're
weeks?
2 or 3 weeks.
Not 3 weeks. If it is
We'll
3
leave.
weeks.
We're negotiating with them right now. They've been, again, we have had regime change. Now, regime change was not one of the things I had as a goal. I had one goal. They will have no nuclear weapon. And that goal has been attained. They will not have nuclear weapons. But we're finishing the job. And I think within maybe 2 weeks, maybe a couple of days longer to do the job.
Meanwhile, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Israel is building new alliances with key regional partners to counter what he called the Iranian threat, though he did not name the countries involved. His remarks come as the US-Israel war on Iran, which began on February 28th, continues to widen across West Asia, disrupting energy supplies, signaling inflation concerns and resulting in significant loss of life.
לא רק שחיזקנו את הברית עם ארצות הברית, אנחנו גם יוצרים בריתות חדשות עם מדינות חשובות באזור נגד האיום האיראני המשותף, ואני מקווה שבקרוב, אזרחי ישראל, אני אוכל לספר לכם יותר על הבריתות החשובות האלה.
U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has reiterated that the Trump administration prefers diplomacy in dealing with Iran, but made it clear that Washington will ensure the Strait of Hormuz remains open one way or another. Speaking in an interview, Rubio said the U.S. is open to a negotiated outcome, but warned that Iran's nuclear ambitions would not be allowed to turn into weaponization, even if peaceful nuclear energy remains acceptable under global frameworks.
The Strait of Hormuz will be open. When this operation is over, it will be open, and it'll be open one way or another. It will be open because Iran agrees to abide by international law and not block the commercial waterway, or a coalition of nations from around the world and the region, with the participation of the United States, will make sure that it's open. One way or the other, it's going to be open. What they want is nuclear energy. There are multiple countries in the region that have or will soon have nuclear energy, and they're going to do it through a well-established mechanism that everyone else has agreed to, and that is that you allow imported fuel you import the fuel, and that fuel is used to power up your power grid and provide energy resources for your people.
U.S. Central Command Chief Brad Cooper met Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz and Army Chief Eyal Zamir to strengthen military coordination against Iran. Officials said the leaders discussed the importance of joint operations and aligned on next steps as the conflict deepens cooperation between the two forces. The war, which began after U.S.-Israel strikes on Iran on February 28th, has since spread across West Asia, causing massive casualties and triggering major disruptions in global energy supplies, pushing up oil, gas and fertilizer prices and fueling inflation concerns worldwide. And France is moving closer to restricting social media access for children, with the Senate approving a draft law targeting users under the age of 15. The proposal is backed by President Emmanuel Macron, who wants the law in place before the next academic year begins in the month of September. However, senators have softened the original proposal, opting against a blanket ban. Instead, they want restrictions to apply only to platforms deemed harmful for children, while allowing access to others with parental consent. The final list of restricted platforms will be defined later through a government decree. Now, with the Senate's approval, the bill could now see further debate between the two chambers of parliament, though the lower house holds the final say. The outcome will be closely watched in the tech world as governments worldwide explore tighter regulations on digital platforms for children. And just hours after French senators backed a law to restrict social media access for those under 15, Australia warned of legal action against platforms accused of violating its under 16 social media ban. Authorities in Canberra say major tech companies have failed to fully enforce the rules allowing children to remain online despite commitments to comply. Take a look.
Australia threatened to sue social media giants on Tuesday for allegedly flouting the nation's social media ban for children under 16. Communications Minister Annika Wells said platforms had promised to follow the law.
All of the platforms who are covered by our social media minimum age laws said that they would respect our laws. And if these companies want to do business in Australia, they must obey Australian laws. As the independent regulator, eSafety is actively investigating potential non-compliance in relation to 5 platforms: Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok and YouTube. Australia's world-leading social media laws are not failing, but big tech is failing to obey the laws.
Now the legal threat marks a change in tone. The government had initially praised tech companies for cooperating when the ban took effect in December. Australia's independent internet regulator eSafety said the platforms had removed around 4.7 million suspected underage accounts. But since then, reports have surfaced of teenagers easily getting around restrictions or staying online without ever being asked their age. In its first compliance report since the ban, eSafety found major gaps. It found that platforms prompted children who had already declared they were under 16 to redo age checks, allowed repeated attempts at age assurance tests until a child passes over 16, and provided poor ways for users to report underage accounts.
And finally, cloud computing major Oracle is reportedly laying off thousands of employees as the tech industry undergoes a major shift towards artificial intelligence. According to reports, the company has not officially confirmed the job cuts, but discussions on platforms like Reddit, X and Line have triggered uncertainty among employees. The layoffs come as Oracle ramps up investments in AI infrastructure, looking to compete more aggressively with rivals like Alphabet and Amazon in the cloud computing space. The move reflects a broader trend across the tech sector, where companies are cutting costs in some areas while pouring resources into AI development. Now, data from Layoffs.fyi shows that more than 70 tech companies have already cut over 40,000 jobs this year, raising concerns about AI-driven disruption in the workforce. Other reports also suggest that Oracle globally could lay off about 30,000 workers, out of which 12,000 could be here in India. Now, the developments signal a structural shift in the industry where the race for AI dominance is reshaping hiring, investment, as well as job security. And with that, we come to an end of this edition of Morning Brief at 9. Thank you so much for watching, but news continues as always right here on News 9. Stay tuned.
In Tamil Nadu, the battle over language returns.
ஒரே மொழி பேசுகிறோம், ஒரே எதிர்காலத்தை நோக்கி நடக்கிறோம்.
Election about identity, loyalty.
Bye bye, Stalin!
Dravida model